tout à l'ordre. On va
Order, please. We'll get started right away. And we're getting off to a late start, so we'll try to move quickly. Today is meeting 79 of this committee, and we're accompanied by Ms. Suzanne Legault, who is here to talk about the estimates. Vote 40 under Justice. She's with us here today to make her opening statement, a 10-minute presentation. Then we'll go to a round of questions, and that will conclude our consideration of the estimates. So we'll go directly to Ms. Legault. You have the floor for 10 minutes.
Committee. I'm accompanied today by Laila Michaud, who is my Director General of Corporate Services and the Office's Chief Financial Officer. Briefly, I will review my office's achievements, our priority for the next year, and some of the challenges that we face. Overall, I must say that I'm very proud of the incredible work that is being done by my very dedicated staff. In 2013-14, we will have 10.5 million available to carry out our work. An added 2.6 million was provided to my office to cover the costs of relocating our offices next fall. We must repay this increase in appropriations over 15 years. In 2014-15 fiscal year, our budget will be just under 10 million, which includes a 500,000 reduction as a result of the Deficit Reduction Action Plan. By the end of 2014-15, we will have fully implemented the budget 2012 cuts and the cost containment measures, which in total will amount to 8% of our budget. In 2013 and 14, 77% of our financial resources have been allocated to our program and 23% to our corporate services. In terms of our human resources, I have 93 full-time equivalents on staff, down from 106 at this time last year. Of the 93, 70 work for the program and 23 for corporate services. Comme vous le savez, au cours des 4 dernières années,
as you know, over the last 4 years, I have made significant changes to streamline our entire operations. And in my view, the results are very positive. On the program side, we have closed about 7,300 complaints since April 2009, including some of our oldest and most complex cases that had accumulated at the office for over the years. For a 4th year in a row, we have completed more files than we received during the year. Our median turnaround time is now 215 days, and, to my mind, what's even more important, 86 days from the day they are assigned to an investigator. I have strengthened our legal capacity to assist with formal investigations and litigation, which had the result of reducing our outsourcing costs for legal expertise. In internal services, we are completing our IMIT strategy. I have outsourced our human resources to Shared Services Canada.
And priorities, I have set ambitious performance targets for our program, and our internal services will be facing a challenging year in 2013 and 14. That being said, my focus remains on the realization of the key results area of my strategic plan, which will be in its 3rd and final year. I will hence this fiscal year renew this strategic direction for the following 3 years to lead the OIC through the end of my mandate in 2017. On developing a leading access to information regime, my focus in the next fiscal year will be to complete our 3 systemic investigations into consultations, interference with the access to information process, and on text-based messaging. I also plan to complete the investigation I launched recently in response to the Environmental Law Clinic complaint. To coincide with the 30th anniversary of the Access to Information Act, and building on the 30 years of experience at the OIC, we will issue recommendations for modernizing the Act by way of a special report to Parliament in the fall of 2013. Nous continuerons de nous efforcer de fournir.
We will continue to strive to provide exemplary service delivery to Canadians. As you saw in our RPP, I have a dedicated team, and we impose on ourselves difficult targets. These are to complete 85% of the administrative cases within 90 days and to complete 75% of priority or early resolution cases within 6 months. My goal is to leave, at the end of my term, a manageable and contemporary inventory of cases to my successor. As part of our work in this regard, we will target the files in our inventory that deal with special delegation, the CBC, and CRA. We will also continue to work towards the completion of our oldest files in our inventory, and we will continue to closely follow the progress of our investigations. We will also continue to seek ways to be an exceptional workplace. To that end, we will roll out a comprehensive talent management program, a new human resources plan, as well as a code of values and ethics, with excellence in all aspects of our work as our goal. Our internal services will be responsible for relocating our office in the fall, the completion of our IMIT strategy, and for exploring further opportunities for shared services with other agents of Parliament.
Principles underpinning access to information is having an independent oversight of government decisions on disclosure. The Access to Information Act explicitly prescribes that the Information Commissioner shall receive and investigate. It's a positive legal obligation which leaves me no discretion to investigate the complaints of individuals who believe that their rights under the Act have not been respected. Even though I was able to decrease my inventory of complaints by close to 29% in the last 4 years, I still have about 2,000 files in my inventory at this time. At the same time, we are receiving more administrative complaints. We're up to 38% in the last fiscal year. In the last month alone, my office registered in April 2013 277 complaints. The additional efficiencies I can now make will remain marginal. When I appeared last year on the 2012 and 2013 main estimates, I did not know if my office's budget would be cut. In a letter to the Minister of Justice at the time, I wrote, "The overall conclusions of my review indicate that any reductions to my office's existing funding envelope will potentially have significant adverse impacts on program results, including eroding the significant progress made over the last 2 years in reducing the inventory of long-standing cases and our ability to deal with the demands of our current inventory." Hence, if you ask me today the question of whether my budget is enough to accomplish my mandate, my answer is no. In the coming months, I will continue, however, to work to improve our performance to meet our ambitious targets. But I will also, and I feel I must, be seeking additional funds to ensure that the Office of the Information Commissioner can meet its obligations under the Act. Frankly, Mr. Chair, I think that if I do not do that, I would be acting irresponsibly. And with that, Mr. Chair, my colleague and I are here to answer your questions.
Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. Mr. Angus, go ahead. You have the first round.
Commissioner, I'm very pleased to have you before us, and I'm glad of your bluntness in terms of the fact that your office is not being given the resources it needs. We see that this government has a terrible record of openness with the Canadian public, and I'm looking at some departments that you've tried to deal with. Natural resources, an F. Refusal rate of 22%. CETA, an F. Canadian Heritage, F, with a refusal rate of 40.8%. Environment Canada, an F. 36.9%. Foreign Affairs, given a special red alert. It seems to me that these are the hot-button ministries that are being used politically by the government. They seem to be the most secretive. What is it that's stopping you from getting the information and Canadians the information that they need from these departments?
Well, Mr. Chair, one thing is very clear when one looks at access to information overall, what we do have is we really have about 20 or 30 departmental institutions overall that receive in excess of about 100 requests per year. Those are really the departments where everyone should focus in terms of performance under the Access to Information Act. Citizenship and Immigration Canada receives close to 50% of all access requests in Canada at the federal level year over year, and that means that the performance of Citizenship and Immigration Canada is actually very important. That department, generally speaking, has been performing very well. Now you have, after that, other institutions like the Canada Revenue Agency, which receives about 5% of overall requests, but generates about 30% of the complaints to my office. So you have to look at each institution, but if you ask me where the focus of the government should be and where the focus of this committee could be, is really in these top institutions that generate the most requests, generate the most complaints, and to follow their performance through their annual reports, which they have to table in Parliament, which are now supposed to incorporate my recommendations to any report cards, that be incorporated their action plan in relation to that in their annual reports to Parliament. I've recommended that. The Treasury Board Secretariat has accepted this recommendation. It will now be part of a mandatory reporting to Parliament. So between my office, the government, Treasury Board Secretariat, this committee, there should be a better scrutiny on the performance of these institutions.
It seems to me, though, again, there are departments that have had previously poor records keeping or poor marks and have improved, and others who've somewhere in the middle. But we have this cluster of, it seems almost defiance of trying to keep the public in the dark. And I know it's not your position to talk about a political strategy on the part of the government, but I'm looking at all key departments that have pretty much have an F in terms of their international reputation or their national reputation in terms of how they politicize themselves. Look at CETA, an F. Canadian Heritage, F. Environment Canada, F. Natural Resources, F. Being that other departments have been improving, what is it at these departments that are putting up stone walls? Are they complying with you? Are they working with you? Or is this an attitude of thinking that they're above the Canadian people?
I would say that each department that is in the top tier group have their own reality for different reasons. You know, when I look at the last results of the report cards in 2010, 2011, we really had 3 institutions that had Fs. So we had at that time a significant improvement in performance of the top tier institutions. I was really quite pleased with that. And that's what I reported in last year's annual report. This year's annual report, for instance, will be different because what I have seen seems to indicate a deterioration in performance. Now, I haven't done a report card this year. What I have seen is, for instance, the RCMP, which was in the top tier in terms of complaints, has now moved up significantly to number 2. They've had a significant increase of administrative complaints. They're obviously not managing their workload. CETA as well this year seems to be having issues. Parks Canada as well, I've noticed issues. So I don't have a full diagnostic for you at this point because the statistics are essentially a year late in terms of overall government departments. But what I'm seeing this past fiscal year is there seems to be a deterioration in the system.
Merci. Non, le temps est écoulé, M. Angus.
Thank you. Your time is up. Mr. Angus, we'll now go to Ms. Davidson. You have the floor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Commissioner and Ms. Michaud for being back with us again today. And we're going to have a shortened time here with you, so I'll get right to my question. I'm sure that you've been following what this committee does, and probably know that Bill C-461 has been introduced to Parliament and been referred to this committee after second reading. So. That bill amends the current exclusion for the CBC, and I know that we've talked about this before. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your views on the current exclusion under the Act, please?
Well, Mr. Chair and Honourable Member, we are preparing a written submission that we would like to present to this committee when the discussion starts on C461. And what we are putting in there is essentially the history of what has happened in terms of the current provision in the legislation since it came into effect in 2007. And we will explain in there as well what happened really in the court cases, because the court cases were not about the substance of that provision. They were really about the fact that, CBC was arguing that because it was an exclusion, I did not have the right to review the records that were the subject of the complaints. And that's why we ended in court. So all that period of time from 2007 to February 2011, or November 2000, anyways, in 2011, I was not able to see any of the records related to these investigations. Subsequent to the Federal Court of Appeal, we were able to start collecting the records and to start doing the investigations. What we will present to you will have an explanation of the differences between an exclusion and an exemption and the different types of exemptions, not only in relation of the analysis for disclosure, but also in relation to the powers of the Commissioner when you have an exclusion or an exemption. The other thing that I will be able to provide to the committee is the fact that since 2007, we have looked at close to 1,200 cases in relation to CBC. We have 200 remaining. Out of all of those cases, no cases dealt with journalistic sources. And I think that that's an important fact to know when we consider possible amendments to the Act and possible additions of exclusions. My personal view as Information Commissioner, after something like 6 years now at the OIC, both as Assistant Commissioner, Interim, and Commissioner, is that I do not support exclusions to the application of the Act as a matter of principle. I really profoundly believe that there should be independent review of government decisions on disclosure. That doesn't mean that the information gets disclosed. We can still decide and recommend that the information should remain protected, like we do many times in terms of personal information or national security matters. National security matters are the subject of a discretionary exemption under the Act. There has not been any issue with the OIC's review and investigations and recommendations in relation to national security matters. I do not believe that there should be a different perspective on documents that are located in the CBC. And journalistic source privilege is something that is protected in law as it is. Mm-hmm. So, not so briefly, these are my original, sort of my initial perspective on that, but we are planning to provide a written document to the committee which will go through all of this information, because I think it's actually quite complex.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to that. Thank you. My time up?
Oui, 20 secondes.
I have 20 seconds left. We'll go to Mr. Andrews then for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and welcome back, Commissioner. You mentioned there in a previous question that 30% of your complaints come from CRA. What are the top three? CRA is 30%. What are the percentage of the other top three?
The three main groups are really CBC, CRA, and anything having to do with special delegations. So these are national security matters, and we have those three groups basically account for 50% or so of our inventory of cases. I'm just trying to find, I do have a list somewhere here of how they're broken down in terms of institutions. Essentially, over the last 4 years, there's about 18 institutions that compose our inventory of complaints. Now, so it's fairly small if you consider the total number of institutions that are covered by the Act. So there's really a top tier, really, of 20 institutions that generate the most requests, that generate the most complaints, and that have information holdings that obviously are of more interests to requesters.
When you look at the complaints, and CRA, for example, has 30% of your complaints, are you noticing the complaints that are coming in that are all similar? Are they similar in nature? Is it a lot of these complaints in each one of these top departments that are similar in nature, that if you could get through that one hurdle with them, then their complaints would go down? Is that a fair assessment? Or
again, it depends on the institutions. What we have seen now that there is an obligation now to disclose completed access to information request topics, right, since January 2012. This was following our recommendation to TBS. And we're beginning to analyze this information because what we see is, for instance, there was an increase in requests related to G8 and G20 at public safety. There was quite a lot of interest in CEDA in terms of specific topics. And then you have other institutions where they have requesters that specialize in those departments or in those topical issues. So we do see, like last month in April, I did see a big chunk of requests, which was on specific topics, but across various departments. It varies, but we do see the trends definitely.
some of these, like bigger departments like CRA, is there anything they can learn from the other departments? Would it be a useful idea to send in some of the representatives from the other departments who do very well at clearing up these requests?
Yes, I think that there are best practices, but what we do find in those institutions that have a lot of requests and a lot of complaints, they're very different. Citizenship and Immigration Canada get a lot of requests from lawyers who are representing people who want to have information about their immigration status or refugee status, and a lot of the time the requests are fairly small in terms of number of pages, and the exemptions that are being applied are very much the same, like personal information. If you look at CRA, it's a different dynamic. They have some requesters that make a large number of requests to them, and they have a very high volume of pages, over 1 million pages in the last year. So their realities are different. What we try to do is we try to work with them depending on their different realities. So in terms of CRA, we have regular meetings. I have met with the head of CRA. It's a new person at the head of the agency. Make sure there's a commitment. We're trying to convince them to look at are there any ways that they can reduce the number of requests by proactive disclosure. I know this is something that they said they were going to look at. They have a specific reality in terms of tax assessments and parallel litigation. So it's a different type of environment.
Does CRA acknowledge that they have a problem?
CRA has, they have a problem. They have a lot of requests. I think that they are committed to their work. We have excellent relationship with the Canada Revenue Agency and all of the access professionals there. We have lists of priorities that we work with them. They have increased, I think, their component of access professionals threefold in the last few years to manage their requests. So CRA is an institution that has a large volume of requests, a large volume of complaints, some specific large volume complainants as well, and they are very collaborative with our office.
Merci, Monsieur Andrews. Le temps est écoulé.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Your time is up. Well, that's the time that we have with you today. I'd like to thank you for coming. We'll be going to the vote.
Interim supply carry. Oui. Et donc, je vais mettre l'autre aussi. Shall
Go with the next one.
less the amount vote in interim supply carry. Oui. Et puis aussi, shall the chair report votes 40 and 45 under justice, votes 15 and 20 under parliament, and vote 45 under treasury board, less the amount vote in interim supply to the house. Oui. Merci. D'accord. C'est ce qui me fait donc à notre réunion.
That concludes today's meeting then. Thank you again for coming, Commissioner. And we'll be hearing from you again soon. The meeting's adjourned.